There came to the abandoned twins a she-wolf that had just given birth. Who would believe the wild beast didn't harm the children? Not enough to harm them, she even helps them. Those whom the she-wolf suckles the hands of a kinsman had the will to destroy. She stood still. With her tail she caresses her tender nurslings and shapes their two bodies with her tongue. You would know that they were the sons of Mars. They had no fear. They pull on her teats and are nourished with a supply of milk promised not to them. She made a name for the place itself for the Luperci. Great is the reward the foster mother has for the milk she gave. What is the festival of the Lupercalia? Why was it such an important part of the religious calendar? And how did the ancient Romans celebrate it? What is the festival of the Lupercalia? Lupercalia is an ancient Roman festival that was celebrated on the 15th of February and can trace its origins right back to the foundations of Rome itself. It celebrated and honored several key players in the foundation story of Rome: Romulus and Remus, goddess Lupa, the she-wolf, and the god Faunus. The festival was a way to honor these divine figures, to reenact the foundation story as both a purification rite to ensure the prosperity of Rome itself, and as an act of pietas, honoring the dead and the ancestors. It was one of the most important festivals for the ancient Romans, at least in the regal and republic periods, because of its vital contribution to affirming a sense of Roman identity and belonging. It is also thought possible that Janos was honored in this festival as well, as it was a festival of beginnings, foundations, and destiny, and Janos was the god of doorways and thresholds. It remembered the time when the babies Romulus and Remus were sentenced to death by their great uncle, a usurper king. Rather than drowning or dying of exposure, they were found by the she-wolf goddess Lupa. She rescued them from the banks of the Tiber. They suckled by her and then were taken to her cave on Palatine Hill, where she cared for them, fed them, and protected them from danger until they were transferred into the hands of a local shepherd, sometimes identified as the god Faustus, other times as the god Faunus. Romulus went on to establish a settlement on Palatine Hill in honor of this place where he was rescued and protected and became the first king of Rome. The festival also celebrated and reenacted a later part of the foundation story, in which Romulus set out the boundaries of his settlement by driving a plough around Palatine Hill and came into conflict with his brother Remus, who had established his community on the Aventine Hill. The festival held the themes, symbology, and energy of destiny, the gods' involvement in the foundation of the city, and reaffirmation of the greatness and sacredness of Rome through its godly favor and mythic beginnings. How was it celebrated? The festival involved purification rites and ancestor worship that were steeped in symbology and ritual that referenced the foundation of Rome. The worshippers would begin by gathering at the Lupercalia, the sacred cave of the she-wolf Lupa. The cave developed into a shrine where Lupa was honored. Here in her shrine, the priests of Lupercalia, the Luperci, meaning wolf priests, were divided into the priests of Romulus, the Luperci Quintiales, and the priests of Remus. The Luperci Fabini sacrificed goats and dogs and made an offering of sacred cakes. Sacred cakes and sacrificial animals were regular elements of a Roman ritual. The Luperci would clothe themselves in part of the skins of the sacrificial goats. Then, still in the Lupercalia, two chosen male youths of a family representing Romulus and Remus were ritually smeared with sacrificial blood, symbolizing bloodlines, lineage, the past, which was then wiped away with milk, representing the breast milk of the she-wolf goddess Lupa. just as the time Romulus and Remus spent with Lupa acted as a threshold, wiping away the before, vulnerable, lost, in order to step into the after, powerful, purposeful. The two youths, along with some of the city's magistrates, it's not clear whether they were there as sponsors, crowd control, or actually participating, then left the cave shrine and ran through the city of Rome, around Palatine Hill, following the ancient boundary stones, termini, that marked the supposed route of Romulus's original boundary. Throughout this run, they would strike everyone they met, not gender specific, with strips of skin from the goats, called februa, to purify, to bring forth new life, whether literal or metaphorical. Some critics said that the runners ran as naked as babies, and Cicero reports that he was embarrassed by this element, though it does seem appropriate, as in the myth, Romulus and Remus left the Lupercalia as young children, and again, nakedness represented new life or rebirth. The race was just as exciting as any national running race today, with the crowds eager and excited about whether the Romulus or the Remus of the year would win this time around. Its place in the wider calendar. The month of February was one for honouring the ancestors and pacifying the dead. Lupercalia was not a standalone event, but was bookended by other festivals that also remembered and honoured the origins of Rome, and offered an opportunity to display the important belief of pietas, a sense of moral duty, and maintenance of good relations with family and the gods. The two major festivals of February, the Parentalia and the Lupercalia, were both concerned with securing the repose of the dead and promoting future prosperity. In February was the movable festival of Amburblium, held this month to purify the whole city and make it new again, as well as Terminalia, the feast of the god Terminus, god of boundaries, in which boundaries and boundary stones were honoured and affirmed with ritual and offerings, and the festival of Callicistis, in which families were encouraged to patch up familial quarrels and grudges and renew family bonds, such as the original argument between Romulus and Remus that led to the death of Remus. There was also the festival of Faunus on the 13th of February, a pastoral god who was a promoter of agriculture. He was worshipped in the hopes that he would bring fertility to the land and flocks. The 13th to the 21st of February, within which Lupercalia sat and was possibly a part of, was the extremely important Parentalia. Parentalia was the festival of the dead, specifically the care of dead parents. The 13th to the 20th were for private commemoration of the dead and the visiting of graves, and the 21st was for public ceremonial commemoration. The 21st of February was known as the Feralia, the public festival of the dead. On this day, food was carried to the tombs and left there for use by the manes, or spirits of the dead. In the public ceremonies and rituals, particular honor was paid to the various tribes of Rome, and the house within each family had ancestors, houses such as the Fabii, which many families have traced back to the original founders of Rome, including the fathers of Rome themselves, Romulus, Remus, and the tribes of Sabines, Etruscans, and Latins that originally populated the Seven Hills. During this time, temples were closed, marriage was forbidden, and many refrained from the general pleasures of life. Right after the Lupercalia, on the 17th of February, was Quinalia, the festival of Quinarus, who was also connected to Romulus, either as the deified Romulus or the original name of Romulus. Some considered him an ancient Sabine god of war and warriors, and he was particularly worshipped and honoured by the Sabine families. Lupercalia was far from the romantic and sexy festival it's been made out to be, but part of sometimes solemn but always respectful remembrance of the past and the creation of a legacy. We can see this within the context of the festivals. Lupercalia is a part of a wider honouring where the Romans had come from, what it is meant to be Roman, and an opportunity to worship both the gods and the ancestors that had made Rome what it was. Lupercalia was part of a larger scene that was all about belonging, identity, and destiny. February was followed by March, a month governed by Mars, the god of spring, fatherhood, and farming. For the ancient Romans, March was the first month of the year and the beginning of the agricultural and military season, and so February was considered the end of the previous year. Perhaps appropriately then, it was considered the month of the dead and the last month to honor the past, the ancestors, and the dead of winter before spring began and life returned. How did Lupercalia evolve? What was its legacy? Lupercalia remained connected to the ideas of kingship, origin, destiny, and legacy. This was affirmed in 44 BCE when Marcus Antonius used his participation as one of the two princely runners as an opportunity to test the popular opinion of whether it was time for a sort of revival of kingly, sole rather than collective, leadership. During the Lupercalia race, he offered Julius Caesar a crown. When the vast crowds responded to this with shock, silence, and even horror, Caesar, quickly reading the crowd, answered with a laugh and refusal. Caesar's successor, Augustus, who did become emperor, set about a renewal and revival of the religious institutions of Rome. By then, the Romans had lost some understanding of the origins of their religious rites and festivals. Even by then, they were considered ancient. One such quandary was to whom exactly Lupercalia was honouring, and they searched for a god to connect it with. Its connection to the goddess Lupa seemingly lost, disregarded, or not enough for one of the most important festivals of this patriarchal society. At this time, several suggestions of gods were put forward, such as Faustilius, the shepherd of the god who raised Romulus and Remus to manhood, or Faunus, god of flocks and fields, whom Ovid shares liked to run, hence the Lupercalia race. Lupercus was a Roman god who seems to have been invented in the Augustan period to give a male deity for the Lupercalia, and so explain its prominence. Lupa, the she-wolf, was at this point given to Lupercus as his partner. As his partner, she was known as the Roman goddess Luperca, and became consort rather than important on her own accord. The festival of Lupercalia was extremely popular and known for its revelry, and it continued to be celebrated well into the beginning of the Christian era. Despite attempts to abolish it by the early Christian church, the festival remained popular, and so instead, under the authority of Pope Julius I in 494 CE, the church made Lupercalia February 15th into the festival of purification of the Virgin Mary, transferring the role of the Mother Protector, Milk Nurse of Rome, and Great Purifier from goddess Lupa to Mother Mary. On a side note, it is also important to add that Lupercalia has no relation or connection to St. Valentine's Day on the 14th of February. No ancient Roman festival was held on this day, as it was considered an ill-omened day. This article first appeared on our blogging site, The Pagan Collective, your #1 place for fun pagan things. It was written by Rachel S. Roberts, author of pagan portals Lupa, Wolf, and Pantheon the Romans, all of which you can find on our website. Thank you so much for watching. A special thank you as always to our members. You too can become a member and gain early access to videos just like this one. Hit the join button for more details, subscribe for weekly videos, ring the bell for notifications, and we will see you next time.